Ons fokus vandag op Wêreldomgewingsdag wat ons pas gevier het en ek gesels met Prof Esler van die Universiteit Stellenbosch. Welcome to Grootplaas.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Prof, met Wêreldomgewingsdag wat pas verby is, val die fokus natuurlik op die belangrikheid van om die aarde te bewaar. Is ek reg? We need to protect the earth.
Absolutely. Although this is, the attention is focused on this one particular day, this has to be, a 24/7, 365-day focus every single year, because we are in a bit of a crisis at the moment in terms of the natural environment. And I think there's an increasing realization that this crisis is actually impacting us, as a species on this planet. So our health, our well-being are being impacted by this damage to the environment. So World Environment Day really tries to kind of focus attention on the environment, but it has to be happening all the time, this attention nowadays.
With this important day, what was the theme this year and what was the specific focus that we need to know about?
I think it's One Planet for All. That's the theme. And essentially, it's really making the point that, there isn't a planet B. We have to actually, we're on this planet, and the feedbacks are such that if we don't do anything to repair or to conserve what's remaining, we're going to be in a serious, hitting serious challenges. So that could be anything. I mean, they're starting to actually figure out the links between our own psychology, our own well-being. So relational values between us and nature, all of those things are starting to increase in obviousness as we research these areas. And, I guess if you think about, so they've done the work and looked at, what part of the landscape is still intact. And, it's less than a quarter of ice-free land, which could be considered wild nowadays. So it's or at least partially impacted by people. We've impacted the planet pretty much everywhere. There's not one place that you can go to nowadays that hasn't some evidence of people, be it plastic in, microplastics in the soil. It's getting into our diets, these plastics. So yes, and I think they've just discovered it in human blood for the first time, microplastics. So,
wow.
These feedbacks are quite serious.
So I take it if we had to get a rate card of how we're doing with this enormous responsibility of protecting the earth, it wouldn't be a great one.
Not at all. So globally, we have targets that we have been put in place to try and stem this tide of loss of habitats, loss of species, loss of diversity in general. The assessment of those targets that are very few that we've actually managed to achieve. So we're not doing a good job, and we definitely need to step the intensity of the work up. The United Nations has declared this decade to be the decade of ecological restoration. So it's putting the focus on repairing areas that have been damaged or destroyed by human activity, and trying to seek ways to repair or restore those areas. So there's quite a lot of focus now on not only conservation, so conserving those wild areas that are really important too, but also trying to actually improve, for example, soils and agricultural systems, which are extremely degraded, and producing food which is not a quality for people to eat because of the degradation we're seeing in the soils, for example.
And this is also your field of speciality, right? I mean, at the university, why are you so passionate about it?
I think for me, ecological restoration carries with it some message of hope. So I'm in a department of conservation ecology and entomology. It's the title of our department. And so conservation is all about protecting species, be it in nature reserves or outside. But because of such a degradation, it's such a doom and gloom situation. So restoration is one way in which we can sort of, I suppose it is about hope. It's about restoring the quality of the environment, restoring the quality of environment for people and for the rest of the organisms that live on the planet with us.
Yeah.
And that diversity is critical for us. So, yeah.
Can you give me a few examples? I mean, I think this platform is so big and such a good opportunity. Where do you think we need to focus more when it comes to the restoration?
So I can talk quite a bit about South Africa. So South Africa, ecological restoration is starting to become a much more of a sort of a narrative in our area, and it's associated with these feedbacks that I keep on talking about. So what we've seen, for example, with Day Zero approaching in many of our cities, is that we're a water-stressed country. And so the degradation associated with, for example, invasion by trees is one way in which we can actually address that challenge proactively by looking at, for example, areas of the terrestrial surface that supply water to cities, and look at how to appropriately manage those areas so that they yield the best supply of water possible. Because we have impacted that water supply. We've impacted it by pollution, so the quality of water has been severely degraded, but also the quantity, and that is associated somewhat with the way that we manage landscapes and how we've allowed some landscapes to be invaded by trees, which are not, were never part of that landscape in the first place. So, for example, I'm talking now in the Western Cape, where fynbos is a treeless vegetation type. So, pines and eucalyptus and so on are not really appropriate for these landscapes, and they take up too much water. So the focus, a lot of focus on ecological restoration in this part of the world is restoration after alien clearing, but there's also restoration after mining, after heavy grazing. So there are a variety of different forms of restoration. And excitingly today, World Environment Day, there's going to be an announcement coming out for some work that we're actually doing on the Cape Flats. It's actually not so much on the Cape Flats, it's the lowland fynbos area within the city of Cape Town. So Blauberg Nature Reserve is a sort of an interesting partnership that we have. It's a research partnership between the City of Cape Town and Stellenbosch University and others. And it's all about trying to understand how to put back an ecosystem that has been very badly degraded by invasive aliens. So that partnership's been going since for 12 years. It's actually since 2012 actually. And so we've just been awarded an Nature Positive grant to carry on that work. So that is quite exciting.
That is exciting, yes.
And the idea is then to actually generate knowledge, which then can be replicated out so that other people elsewhere in this environment can actually replicate what we do and build out this restoration process with time.
But protection is also a big and important element. I mean, there's still 100%. A lot of spaces that needs protection. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, so maybe I can actually elaborate through an example of how critical it is.
You're welcome.
So, I've just been marking an assignment for our students, and it's around, we ask the students to choose one species that occurs in a particular area in South Africa, and to motivate why they've chosen that species, and then they unpack and look at that species and understand everything about its ecology. And what was very interesting to me was in the personal motivations of the students and what they provided. And so many of them said that the reason why they chose X or Y species was because when they were a child, they visited a nature reserve, game reserve, and that is what inspired them. That's what inspired them to do conservation in the first place and to try and make a difference. So I think these nature reserves, they play an important role, a variety of different roles. Firstly, they provide habitat which is relatively protected from major interruptions, so agriculture and poaching, if we can get that under control, things like that. So they provide that habitat for those species. but they also provide a place where people can come and experience what wild nature is. And that experience is so critical to a future sort of custodianship of nature. And so that, those areas are really critical as well as actually, extending beyond that. So looking at, for example, our agricultural systems and making sure that we go gently on those systems too, that we find ways to minimize impact, but still provide food security. So that's actually quite a strong emphasis in our department. So we sit in the Faculty of Agriculture and Agri-Sciences, and it's all about trying to actually work with agriculture to find ways to minimize impact.
When one listens to a conversation like this, it's easy to think, oh, but it's all these big things, this world-changing things. But can we break it down to what can individuals do? How can I approach my daily life to make a small impact in the bigger scheme of things? Can you maybe give me some tips just in a short thought?
So I think that there are many things, and I think one has to actually realize that those small actions, if they're replicated enough, can actually end up being big actions.
Absolutely.
So those might be, for example, it depends on where, what situation you find yourself in. But personally, for me, one of the biggest realizations that I had was when I started actually seriously getting involved in growing organic vegetables.
Yes.
In a small patch of land. So if you have the ability to do that, and the ability to nurture soil and to nurture the diversity that comes with that that soil, you actually can impact your own health. So they're feedbacks to your own personal well-being and health. And I've certainly demonstrated that in my own life. But so those are small actions that they are positive. They might improve food security if you think about it. Yes. But they also connect people strongly to the land as well. So any way of actually, finding or having that experience of having the connection, it will grow the love for the land. But other actions might be, for example, looking at when you go into a supermarket, and again, if you have the choice to do that, so you can compare where these things come from. So if they come from, say, your tin of tomatoes comes from the other side of the planet, well, you know that there's going to be a carbon cost involved in buying that, which might not necessarily be seen in the final price. But if you have the ability to make that decision to buy local, to support local, you're also actually, reducing your own impact on the land as well. So other things would certainly be trying to reuse things, to recycle things, to, so essentially think about the circular economy to try and actually reduce impact that way. Because, if you think about it, behavioral changes are potentially one way in which we can start collectively to minimize impact. Perhaps maybe going towards a more plant-based diet, not necessarily increasing reducing meat completely out of diet, but a more plant-based diet is certainly going to be less impact on the environment overall when it comes to the food production systems.
I have to interrupt you rudely. I think we can speak for another 3-4 hours. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the work you're doing, and good luck.
It's a pleasure.
Dit was dan nou professor Karen Esler van die Universiteit Stellenbosch en ons fokus Wêreldomgewingsdag. Speel jou deel.